Usually when we talk about diagnosing a big societal problem, there's this expectation of precision.
Right, like you want a clear answer.
Exactly. It's like engineering or medicine. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the radius bone, and the doctor just points to it and says, there it is.
Yeah, we put a cast on it and you heal.
Right. It's binary. It's either broken or it's not broken.
And I think we crave that kind of visibility, We want to be able to point to an anomaly on a screen and categorize it.
Because categorization feels like control.
Precisely. It gives us a sense of control over the chaos.
But then you step into the world of neurodevelopment and cultural trauma and societal conditioning, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just, it's utterly useless.
Oh, completely useless. The whole landscape changes.
Yeah. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape of the modern male experience that is notoriously murky. The symptoms are everywhere.
They really are. You've got dropping college enrollment for men.
Right, and skyrocketing bachelor rates.
And obviously, the absolute explosion of the manosphere online.
Right. But even with all those symptoms, everyone disagrees on the root cause.
That is the crux of it right there.
Yeah.
Are we looking at a generation of men who are, simply failing to adapt to a more equitable world?
Right, the failure to adapt theory.
Yeah. Or, and this is the alternative, are we looking at a system that has been deliberately calibrated to pathologize their baseline behavior?
And wow, that question right there, that brings us to the absolute powder keg that we are unpacking today.
It is definitely a powder keg.
It really is. So welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we are venturing into some incredibly intense territory.
Very intense. We're looking at a highly controversial new manual for modern men.
Yeah, a manual that claims to hold the literal blueprint for escaping societal control.
It's a text that it doesn't just diagnose the modern male condition, it treats the modern world as a hostile occupying force.
A hostile occupying force. Just let that sink in. But before we cross that threshold, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening right now.
Yes, definitely hit that subscribe button.
And if you want to brave the source material for yourself, which we highly recommend, check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy today's ebook.
Having the actual text in front of you might really be necessary to fully grasp the sheer scale of what this guy's proposing.
Totally. You'll also want to follow the author's Substack, which is at Conrad Riker, to see his ongoing work.
So let's get into it. What's the mission today?
Okay, let's lay out the mission. We are reviewing a brand new ebook titled Alchemy of Adversity, a red-pilled guide to personal transformation.
And that's by Conrad Riker.
Yes, Conrad Riker. And just to give you the lay of the land here, this text is aggressively targeted toward a men's rights red-pilled manosphere audience.
Aggressively is the right word.
Yeah. The foundational premise of his entire book rests on, understanding the history of our institutions.
Right, institutions like the university system, corporate HR departments, the media.
Exactly. He wants you to understand what they were before they were, in his very explicit view, completely captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
It really is an unapologetic battle plan for men who feel totally alienated by the modern world.
Which, necessitates a very, very clear framing for how you and I are going to approach this deep dive.
Absolutely. We need to be crystal clear here. The source material touches on gender, institutional trust, family courts, media manipulation.
All incredibly politically charged cultural flashpoints.
Right. Highly charged.
So to you, the listener, we want to make it absolutely explicit right up front that neither of us is taking a side here.
None whatsoever.
We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints or the ideologies or the claims made by Conrad Riker in this book.
Our goal is strictly impartial reporting. We're here for impartial analysis.
Exactly. We are just here to deconstruct the architecture of his arguments, right? To explain how he connects these historical and psychological dots.
Because regardless of how you feel about it, you need to fully understand the ideas that are driving a very significant cultural subsegment right now.
Right, you can't ignore it. So we're examining the machinery of his worldview.
And I think the very first gear in that machine is his framing of the modern male experience.
How so?
Well, Riker doesn't view the struggles of young men today as just a byproduct of shifting economic tides or, random bad luck.
He doesn't think it's an accident.
Not at all. When he looks at the data, and he cites this one statistic claiming that 72% of young men feel actively attacked by the society that demands their labor.
Wow. 72%.
Yeah, 72%. When he sees that, he sees a calculated scheme.
Right out of the gate, in the first few pages, he states that weak men are simply easier to govern.
Yes, that's a core tenet for him.
He frames modern institutional structures, things we usually think of as safety nets, not as safety nets at all, but as a domestication project.
A domestication project, exactly.
Yeah.
Which leads him directly to his proposed antidote. He called it the crucible principle.
The crucible principle.
Okay.
Break that down for us.
So, Riker argues that resilient men are not born, they are forged. And they can only be forged in what he terms the furnace of necessity.
The furnace of necessity. The imagery there is just very primal.
It's highly deliberate. He leans heavily into the medieval concept of alchemy.
Right, the attempt to transmute base metals like lead into gold.
Exactly. But in Riker's framework, the base metal isn't actual lead. The base metal is suffering, it's betrayal, it's failure, it's systemic friction.
And the gold.
The gold is unbreakable resolve, absolute, unshakable personal sovereignty.
So he takes direct aim at, like, the modern vernacular of therapy and emotional wellness.
Oh, he utterly rejects it. He despises concepts like safe spaces or, toxic masculinity.
Because to Riker, that vocabulary is a linguistic cage.
Right. A cage designed to pathologize natural male aggression and strength.
He demands this uncompromising rejection of the victim narrative, like total rejection.
In his view, if you suffer a setback, you don't process it in a drum circle. You don't talk it out, you metabolize it as fuel.
Okay, let's unpack this, because he illustrates this with a really vivid, kind of unhinged story about a CEO in a boardroom.
Ah, yes, the $3,000 suit anecdote.
The suit anecdote, it's wild. So Riker describes watching this executive, right? They're in this high-stakes board meeting.
A very tense meeting, supposedly.
Right, and this CEO literally douses the sleeve of his own bespoke suit with lighter fluid.
While wearing it.
While wearing it. He just pulls out a Zippo, strikes a match, and sets his own arm on fire.
Just sets himself ablaze in the boardroom.
And as the fabric is burning, he just calmly sits there, reciting Marcus Aurelius to the board of directors.
It's an insane visual.
Yeah.
But Riker uses that specific moment to demonstrate a concept.
The elimination of Plan B.
Exactly. He explains that the CEO wasn't just engaging in, erratic corporate performance art.
Right, it wasn't a stunt.
Well, it was a stunt, but it had a foundation. This was a guy who had survived Navy SEAL Hell Week.
Right. And Riker goes into detail breaking down Hell Week.
He really does. He talks about the 5 days of sleep deprivation.
The hypothermia in the Pacific Ocean.
And he specifically highlights what they call the circus, which is 12 hours of nonstop, brutal calisthenics.
Designed to break, what, 72% of the candidates?
Something like that, yeah. So the underlying psychology of this burning suit story, Riker says, is to physically manifest the concept of burning the ships.
Right, the old conqueror tactic.
Yeah, the idea that weakness only evaporates when retreat is literally no longer an option.
You torch the backup plan.
You torch it, and by doing so, you force your brain to engage these primal survival mechanisms that usually just lie dormant when we're in a comfortable environment.
Okay, I have to jump in and test that logic, though, because it is an incredibly extreme way to live day to day.
It's extremely abrasive, yes.
The author is essentially looking at modern comfort, like air conditioning, HR departments, unemployment insurance, and he sees it as a padded cell.
Yes, a soft prison.
It keeps you from getting bruised, but it fundamentally restricts your ability to build calluses.
That's his argument.
But I have to wonder, how practical is this burn Plan B mentality actually? Like, for the average guy?
Good fair question.
Right. If you're just trying to pay a mortgage and raise your kids, you can't realistically light your suit on fire during a middle management status meeting.
Probably going to get you fired.
Yeah.
Or arrested.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So does he really expect, like, a guy working in IT to adopt the mindset of a Spartan hoplite?
What's fascinating here is that he absolutely does. And he anticipates that exact pushback from the reader.
How does he justify it?
Riker grounds this whole philosophy in a very specific interpretation of history and neuroscience. You mentioned the Spartans.
Yep.
He cites Herodotus detailing the Battle of Thermopylae.
Right. Leonidas and the 300.
Exactly. When Xerxes' envoy threatened King Leonidas by boasting that Persian arrows would blot out the sun, Leonidas didn't try to negotiate a truce.
He gave that famous line.
He replied, "Then we'll fight in the shade." And Riker uses that specific historical anecdote to contrast historical resolve with the modern man who, in Riker's own words, folds when a Tinder match doesn't immediately respond.
Wow. That's a pretty sharp comparison.
He's trying to highlight the contrast. He even brings Jesus fasting in the Judean desert into this framework.
Which is an interesting leap.
It is. He doesn't frame the 40 days in the desert as like a religious act of piety or spiritual devotion.
No. How does he frame it?
He frames it as an ancient cosmic stress test.
Oh, wow.
He calls it anti-fragility training.
Anti-fragility. Okay, I know that's a big concept in certain circles right now.
Yes, it's the key concept there. It's the idea, popularized by Nassim Taleb, that some systems actually require shock and volatility to grow stronger.
Like a muscle. You have to tear it to build it.
Exactly. And Riker applies this myologically. He actually cites Yale researchers who study something called stress inoculation.
Stress inoculation. What does the data say on that?
The data he presents suggests that controlled voluntary suffering things like taking ice-cold showers, fasting for extended periods, or engaging in intense physical strain.
Doing hard things on purpose.
Right. Doing that actually lowers the cortisol and anxiety spikes you experience during unexpected real-world crises.
By how much?
He claims by up to 38%.
Wow. So he's leaning heavily into the documented psychology of post-traumatic growth.
He is. He's arguing that modern society has completely pathologized the very friction that is required to trigger that growth in men.
Okay, but to bridge the gap between, Spartan warriors and that IT worker we talked about, he introduces a practical mechanism, right?
He does. He calls it the alchemist's ledger.
The alchemist ledger.
Yeah.
It's essentially tracking your daily suffering like it's a cryptocurrency portfolio.
That's a really good way to picture it, actually. He tells men to rate their daily trials on a scale of 1 to 10.
So give us an example.
So getting a flat tire on the highway in the rain, that's a 3.
Okay, manageable.
Getting passed over for a major promotion at work, that's a 6.
Ouch, but okay.
Being served unexpected divorce papers, that is an 8.
Right. And by doing this,
By quantifying what he calls the growth dividends of these painful events, he is attempting to artificially engineer an internal locus of control.
which is deeply, deeply stoic. I mean, it reframes tragedy into tuition.
Tuition is the perfect word for it.
Right. You aren't a victim of a terrible divorce. You just paid a very heavy tuition fee for a doctorate in legal and emotional self-reliance.
That's exactly how he phrases it. You write your losses in black ink today, and you overwrite them in red ink tomorrow with the tactical lesson you learned.
But, and this is a big but, Riker cautions that building this kind of internal fortress is completely impossible if your attention is constantly being hijacked.
Right. If physical and emotional comfort is the first enemy, he identifies a second, far more insidious enemy.
And it's sitting right in our pockets.
Yes, it is.
Because it's one thing to fortify your own mind by reframing your personal struggles, but Riker argues that mental fortitude is entirely useless if your baseline attention span has been eroded to nothing.
You have to have the focus to actually apply the ledger.
Exactly. And that leads us directly into his theory on escaping the matrix of modern media and his whole concept of institutional betrayal.
This is where the text really shifts gears. It moves from personal resilience into what he considers active cultural warfare.
Yeah, he takes no prisoners here.
Riker doesn't treat social media algorithms as merely, bad habits or time wasters.
No, he goes much further.
He classifies them as weaponized distraction. He actually draws a direct comparison between TikTok or Instagram Reels and IEDs.
Improvised explosive devices.
Yes. He argues they are engineered to weaponize digital trash to chemically castrate a man's attention span.
Chemically castrate the attention span. That is quite a phrase.
He describes it as a constant, unrelenting dopamine drip.
Right, because every time you scroll, you get a micro hit of dopamine.
And dopamine is the neurotransmitter responsible for reward and motivation. So over time, your baseline dopamine levels drop.
Meaning you require more extreme stimuli just to feel normal.
Exactly. And he points out this very dark irony.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. The tech billionaires.
Yes, the very tech billionaires who engineered these highly addictive loops in Silicon Valley are the exact same ones investing millions in mindfulness apps and private retreats.
Profiting while your attention span literally dies.
Right. And he backs this physiological claim up by citing an MIT study.
What did the study find?
It indicated that 72% of male users report severe anxiety spikes and lethargy after binge watching what Riker calls male guilt reels.
Wait, what is a male guilt reel?
He defines it as content specifically algorithmicized to induce shame, inadequacy, or apologize for traditional male behavior.
Okay, I see. So to combat this, his prescription is severe.
A hardline, total rejection of all digital media.
Total. And his replacement for it is very specific. He doesn't just say, read more blogs.
No, he specifically prescribes physical printed books,
Dead trees.
dead trees, and he heavily leans toward pre-1960s literature.
Right, so he lists authors like Dostoevsky, Hemingway,
Churchill's wartime speeches,
and Sun Tzu.
Sun Tzu, of course, The Art of War, and the mechanism behind this choice is actually really fascinating.
Let's unpack the mechanism because it's not just about the stories.
No, it's physiological. He cites neuroscientists who study reading comprehension,
Okay.
and they note that humans retain significantly more information from printed pages than they do from digital screens.
Right, I've heard this. It has to do with spatial mapping.
Exactly. When you read a physical book, your brain maps the information spatially.
Like you remember that a certain important passage was on the top left of the page.
Yes, and you physically feel that it was maybe a third of the way through the thickness of the book. Your hands remember the weight.
And Riker argues that ink on dead trees is static. It cannot algorithmically gaslight you.
Right, a printed book doesn't shift its text based on your browsing history. It just is what it is.
So, beyond the spatial memory stuff, the text is packed with these anecdotes of men who reclaimed their agency by totally unplugging.
Yeah, he tells several stories here. There's the story of a Marine veteran who realized he was doom scrolling Instagram before breakfast every single day.
And what did the Marine do?
The author claims this Marine said he'd rather clear a Taliban bunker than subject his brain to that digital sludge for one more morning.
Wow.
And he allegedly deleted all his accounts mid-conversation with Riker.
Just pulled the plug. He also brings up a guy named Days, right?
Dave, yes. Dave was a 300-pound forum moderator.
A guy who spent his entire life in the digital ether.
Yep. And according to the book, Dave quits the gaming forums cold turkey. He takes up a physical blacksmithing side hustle.
Blacksmithing. Very tactile.
Very. He drops 40 pounds, and now he literally bends iron bars in his garage while listening to audiobooks on Stoicism.
It's like a modern fable.
It really is designed to be one. Or there's the millennial who swapped his smartphone for a stripped-down, old-school flip phone.
I love this one.
Riker notes that the sheer, unadulterated boredom this guy experienced because he couldn't scroll made him desperate enough to interact with the physical world again.
It gave him the psychological push to cold approach his future wife in a grocery store.
Right, and Riker adds a very sharp piece of commentary there, too.
Yeah, he claims that such a direct, unmediated romantic approach in a grocery store would likely get a man reported to HR today.
Which ties back into his whole view on modern society.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and where I want to push back a little on the reading list aspect.
Go for it.
So, he cites a study claiming that reading Hemingway specifically over a modern author like, say, Yuval Noah Harari boosts mental resilience in men by 19%.
Yes, that's the claim.
Is it really the content of Hemingway's prose, like the bullfighting and the masculine archetypes, that creates this measurable psychological change?
You're wondering if it's the medium or the message.
Exactly. Or is it simply the physical act of unplugging, sitting in silence, and forcing your brain to engage with a difficult, dense text that builds the grit? Does it have to be Hemingway?
Well, Riker would argue that they are inextricably linked.
How so?
The medium is crucial because it demands sustained, unbroken focus. That rebuilds what he calls attention span testosterone.
Attention span testosterone.
But the content is equally vital to him, and that ties into his broader theory of the betrayal economy.
The betrayal economy. Let's get into that.
He views modern institutions, so the corporate HR departments, the universities, legacy media networks like CNN, as hostile entities.
Hostile entities that demand total ideological obedience.
Yes, he uses a very specific phrase to describe this compliance culture.
Atheistic Jesuitism.
Atheistic Jesuitism. That is a very loaded, very precise historical comparison.
Write that down for us.
The Jesuits were the intellectual vanguard of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. They were known for their rigorous, uncompromising defense of dogma and their intense educational system. Riker is arguing that modern corporate and academic institutions operate with that exact same level of inquisitorial zeal.
Just without the religion.
Right, they enforce a secular dogma, and they do it with strict, punitive measures demanding total intellectual submission from men.
He calls it a virtue signaling lobotomy.
Yes.
He argues that corporations actively punish male employees for observing what he considers basic biological realities while simultaneously relying entirely on traditional male physical courage when actual chaos erupts.
And to illustrate this hypocrisy, he dissects a story about a Marine veteran working in a corporate office in Denver.
The story is intense.
It is. So an active shooter situation began to unfold in this office building.
Right.
And this veteran, acting on instinct, grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher, confronted the shooter directly, and physically subdued him,
Saving lives.
saving multiple lives. But weeks later, according to Riker, this veteran was allegedly terminated by his company.
Terminated for what?
Terminated for toxic masculinity.
Wait, really?
According to the book, yes, because the shooter's family threatened a lawsuit claiming the veteran used excessive force and caused the shooter emotional trauma.
Wow. So the author uses that extreme case to argue a larger point.
He uses it to argue that society criminalizes protective male instincts in peacetime, but absolutely expects men to act as human shields when the bullets actually start flying.
And this institutional distrust, it really reaches a boiling point when he analyzes a viral clip from a 2022 Texas school board meeting.
Ah, the Trevor Wilkins clip.
Yes, Trevor Wilkins, a father in Texas, stood at the microphone during a public comment period, and he simply asked the district superintendent to define a woman.
And the clip is infamous because of the reaction.
Right, the superintendent just sits there in dead silence.
Completely freezes.
The author notes that the bureaucrat froze like a deer in headlights, just unable or unwilling to answer a fundamental biological question on the public record.
For Riker, that silence isn't just an awkward political moment caught on camera.
No, it's symbolic.
It is the sound of the institutional matrix fracturing. He uses it as concrete proof that our sense-making institutions have become so captured by ideology that they literally cannot defend objective reality.
And that profound distrust, that right there, serves as the bridge to what is arguably the most controversial section of the entire book.
Without a doubt, the most controversial.
His critique of the medical and educational establishments regarding gender.
Oh, yes.
Because Riker views language the way a programmer views source code.
That's a great analogy.
Right. If you allow someone else to define the variables like pronouns or the definition of a woman, you are giving them root access to your operating system.
Exactly. They don't need to argue with you if they control the code that processes your thoughts.
And that brings us to his concept of linguistic warfare.
He goes on a fierce, relentless offensive against modern gender ideology here.
He doesn't just disagree with it politically.
No, he frames it as a medical and psychological atrocity. He actually draws a direct, unflinching line from modern gender-affirming care back to Walter Freeman.
Walter Freeman. Just to remind you, Walter Freeman was the neurologist who popularized the transorbital lobotomy back in the 1940s and 50s.
That's right.
He famously drove a van across America, the lobotomobile, using what was essentially an ice pick driven through the eye socket to sever connections in the prefrontal cortex.
And he did this to cure depression and anxiety.
It was hailed as a medical miracle at the time, before being universally condemned as totally barbaric.
So Riker uses that historical parallel to argue that medical consensus can be horrifically historically wrong.
He views the chemical and surgical alteration of minors today as the exact same kind of ideologically driven malpractice.
He calls teaching children about gender fluidity a sacrament of nihilism.
A sacrament of nihilism. He goes really deep into theology to explain the philosophical roots of this, comparing it to Gnosticism.
This is a critical intellectual pillar for understanding his worldview, actually.
Break down the Gnosticism connection.
So Gnosticism was a collection of ancient religious ideas that fundamentally believed the physical, material world, including the human body, was a flawed, evil prison.
Created by a lesser deity, right?
Right. And they believed that only the pure, internal, intangible spirit was good. The body was just a meat sack to be discarded.
So Riker is arguing that modern gender ideology, the idea that an individual can be born in the quote-unquote wrong body, and that the physical flesh must be altered to match a purely internal subjective feeling, is just Gnosticism repackaged for the 21st century.
Precisely. He summarizes it by writing, "You aren't a soul trapped in flesh. You are an embodied being. To mutilate the temple is to spit on the architect."
He views the physical body and biological sex as completely immutable facts of nature,
And to bolster this, the book highlights the growing number of detransitioners.
referring to them as the canaries in the coal mine.
He prominently features the case of Kira Bell in the UK.
Right, the Tavistock Clinic case.
Yes. She sued the Tavistock Clinic after being fast-tracked for puberty blockers and surgery at a very young age. She later regretted it, calling it medical experimentation on vulnerable children.
And Riker points to the cascade of lawsuits currently hitting clinics, arguing that biological reality has a 100% win rate against social ideology over a long enough timeline.
He believes the pendulum is going to swing back hard.
So what is his prescription? How does a man fight this cultural pathogen?
His prescription is for fathers to act as the immune system of the patriarchy.
The immune system.
He wants fathers to function like T cells.
Aggressively identifying and destroying these ideas before they infect their children.
Exactly. And he provides a really striking example of this in practice.
Dinner table drills.
Yeah, dinner table drills. He describes a father running literal debate drills at the family dinner table.
Okay, paint this picture for us.
The father role plays as a highly progressive teacher introducing gender fluidity to a classroom.
And his sons.
His sons have to practice dismantling those progressive arguments in real time while they eat.
He describes an 8-year-old boy slamming his hand on the table and shouting, "Chromosomes don't care about your feelings."
Which the author views as essential psychological armor. He thinks this kind of dinner table combat is necessary for survival.
And this militarization of parenting, it extends really deep into linguistics as well. Riker heavily advocates for teaching boys Latin.
Which seems random at first, but he notes a massive spike in Latin textbook sales to conservative homeschooling families.
And he explains the linguistic mechanics behind why they're doing it.
Because dead languages resist social engineering.
Exactly.
Latin is a highly inflected language with rigid, fixed grammatical genders. You cannot force the Latin word for mother, mater, to become a gender-neutral term without breaking the entire grammatical structure of the sentence.
It just doesn't compute.
Right. By teaching a child Latin, you are installing an operating system built on objective, structural rules that modern activists literally cannot hack.
He even cites a case where a Texas father was allegedly facing massive fines for homeschooling his sons using Cicero's original texts instead of the state-approved modules.
With bureaucrats reportedly framing classical Latin as incompatible with modern inclusive environments.
So Riker uses that to ask a structural question. How does linguistic control link directly to societal control?
This raises an important question, right? He brings up Mao's Red Guards during the Chinese Cultural Revolution.
A terrifying historical precedent.
The Red Guards systematically destroyed ancient Confucian texts and replaced them with the oversimplified slogans of Mao's Little Red Book.
If you sever a population's language from its history and from objective biology, institutions can just rewrite reality on a whim.
So the tactical advice he gives men is to employ what he calls semantic jujitsu.
Semantic jujitsu. Give us an example of how that works in the wild.
Okay, so if HR pulls you into a meeting and accuses you of displaying toxic masculinity, you don't grovel.
Right.
You don't try to explain yourself. You totally reject the premise of the accusation.
You reframe it and own it.
You look them in the eye and say, what you are calling toxic masculinity is actually my biological imperative to protect and assert boundaries.
Wow. He even suggests installing browser plugins that automatically replace progressive buzzwords with biologically accurate terms.
Arguing that mental hygiene requires you to stop ingesting verbal poison.
But, and this is the kicker, resisting that level of pervasive cultural programming, like literally standing in the HR office and refusing to bend the knee, that requires an immense amount of psychological fortitude.
An unbelievable amount.
And according to Riker, you cannot build that mental fortitude without intense physical conditioning.
Which brings us to his radical blueprint for the physical body.
Yeah.
Riker takes a very sharp, deliberate turn away from modern pop psychology here. He explicitly rejects Joseph Campbell's famous hero's journey.
Which is fascinating because the hero's journey is the foundational framework for almost all of modern storytelling.
Star Wars, The Matrix, Lord of the Rings.
It's the monomyth. It's everywhere.
But Riker claims that over the last few decades, Campbell's framework has been completely domesticated.
How so?
He argues that modern interpretations focus entirely on the return phase of the journey.
Making it soft.
Exactly. Turning it into a therapeutic narrative where the hero goes on a quest just to process his feelings, achieve self-actualization, and bring back a metaphorical elixir of empathy for the community.
Right. Riker thinks that's way too soft. He wants men to look further back in history, past Campbell, to the raw, unapologetic, violent Anglo-Saxon ethos of epic poems like Beowulf.
Because Beowulf didn't sit in a circle to process his anxiety about the monster Grendel.
No, he did not.
He didn't try to understand Grendel's systemic marginalization. He tore the monster's arm off with his bare hands and mounted it to the mead hall rafters.
And Riker argues that modern psychology views male rage as a disease to be cured with SSRIs.
Whereas human history relied on focused male aggression to build walls, conquer frontiers, and defend civilizations.
And to operationalize that ancient ethos, he doesn't suggest men go to the gym just to do bicep curls and look good.
Not at all. He specifically mandates combat training.
Primarily Brazilian jiu-jitsu and boxing.
Right, he chooses those over modern wellness trends like yoga or mindfulness.
He dismisses yoga entirely.
He claims its modern Western iteration encourages men to connect with feminine energy and become passive observers of their bodies.
Riker wants men to connect their fists with a heavy bag until the physical calluses form what he calls philosophical treatises on reality.
He introduces a really vital idea here called the tap-out paradox.
The tap-out paradox.
The tap-out paradox is the mechanical reality that submission must precede dominance.
Right, you have to lose before you can win.
In jiu-jitsu, before you can ever learn to control an opponent, you have to be tapped out, choked, joint-locked, and physically humbled hundreds and hundreds of times.
He presents the sheer panic of surviving a cross-collar choke or the jarring reality of taking a clean jab to the jaw in a boxing ring as the ultimate antidote to modern corporate conditioning.
And he actually points to neurobiological data here to back it up.
What's the data say?
He cites studies showing that when a man takes a clean punch in sparring, his nervous system experiences an immediate primal reset.
A reset.
Yes. The cortisol levels, the stress hormones that build up from answering emails and sitting in traffic all week, they drop significantly faster after a physical sparring session than they do after sitting through a corporate seminar on emotional regulation.
Because the mat is a realm of objective truth.
Exactly. The mat doesn't care about your pronouns, it doesn't care about your job title or your feelings.
Gravity and leverage do not negotiate.
The mat only cares if you know how to defend the takedown. It strips away all the linguistic and social artifice.
Okay, let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
So what does this all mean? The author is essentially prescribing acute, blunt force, physical trauma, like literally getting choked out to cure feelings of psychological alienation.
Yes, that is his prescription.
But doesn't this risk creating a cohort of men who are entirely closed off to basic emotional intelligence?
That's the obvious concern.
Right. If your only mechanism for processing stress is simulated violence, aren't you just building a completely different kind of dysfunctional wall?
Well, if you look at it strictly through Riker's lens, emotional intelligence, as it is defined by HR departments and therapeutic culture today, is not a virtue.
What is it then?
It is a snare. It is a set of rules designed by a feminine-coded system to make men docile, to make them second-guess their own protective and competitive instincts.
Ah, okay. He describes modern emotional intelligence metrics as a psychological squid game.
That's exactly how he puts it. If a man acts assertively, he's penalized for being toxic.
Right.
If he opens up and acts vulnerable, he loses the respect of his peers and his partner. He's eliminated either way.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly. So physical combat isn't about turning men into mindless brutes for him, it's about anchoring them.
Anchoring them to reality.
Yes. And he connects this to the ancient Anglo-Saxon concept of weird.
Weird. W-Y-R-D.
Yeah.
Define weird for us in this context.
Weird is often loosely translated as fate, but not in the passive, whatever happens sense.
Not like destiny.
No. In the Anglo-Saxon mind, weird was the bloody, glorious, active friction of a man's iron will grinding against the harsh, indifferent realities of the universe.
So Riker sees martial arts as a proxy for weird.
Reclaiming your physical agency on the mat is the first step to reclaiming your agency in a world where men feel legally, economically, and culturally disenfranchised.
If the digital world is trying to gaslight you into believing up is down, the physical pain of a sparring session reminds you exactly where the ground is.
Perfectly stated.
And that desire for total sovereignty, that refusal to be managed by a system, it extends far beyond the jiu-jitsu gym.
Oh, it goes way past the gym.
Riker takes that exact same warlord mindset and aggressively maps it onto how he tells men to handle their money, their marriages, and their legal liabilities.
Which brings us to the operational core of the book.
Economic alchemy and what he calls patriarchal compound interest.
This is where the philosophy really turns into raw, cutthroat strategy.
Yeah, this section is intense. Riker views the modern state-sanctioned marriage contract as the ultimate legal liability trap for a man.
He points out the statistical reality that bachelor rates have skyrocketed by 300% since 1990.
300%.
And while sociologists often blame video games or extended adolescence for that, Riker attributes this directly to irrational risk assessment by men.
He claims men are actively avoiding marriage because they fear false accusations, heavily biased family courts, and a legal system that operates on what he calls the Me Too version of spectral evidence.
Spectral evidence, that's a deep historical cut.
Right, spectral evidence being the kind of unprovable feeling-based testimony used during the Salem witch trials.
Right, where you can't prove it, but the feeling is enough to convict.
He summarizes the modern male mindset toward marriage by asking, why buy the cow when the cow can falsely accuse you of bovine harassment, trigger a no-fault divorce, and legally take half the farm?
It is an incredibly cynical view of modern family law.
Extremely cynical.
However, crucially, Riker does not advocate for the MG2W movement.
MGTOW, meaning men going their own way.
Right, which is a movement that suggests men should just avoid women in relationships entirely.
He doesn't want men to tap out of family life.
No, instead, he champions a return to a very rigid traditional framework. He calls it Adamic union.
Adamic union. Going back to Adam and Eve, the foundational patriarchy.
Yes, a structural hierarchy where the man holds absolute authority in the household.
He actually references the Roman legal concept of patria potestas.
Which literally meant the head of the household held the absolute power of life and death over his family independence.
Obviously, he isn't advocating for literal life and death legal power today.
No, but he is advocating for that level of structural sovereignty within the home.
Because he believes the feminist experiment of dual income, egalitarian marriages has structurally failed.
He cites a Gallup poll suggesting that 54% of Gen Z women are now actively desiring traditional homemaker roles due to what he terms feminist fatigue.
Feminist fatigue.
He argues that young women are exhausted by the false promise of girl boss corporate culture.
They're realizing that 98 hours a week of maternal labor and household logistics cannot simply be outsourced to Uber Eats and iPad nannies without catastrophic results for the family's cohesion.
And this leads to his most fascinating economic theory in the book.
Patriarchal compound interest.
Patriarchal compound interest. So Riker tracked data on Fortune 500 CEOs and high net worth individuals.
And what did he find?
He noted that a massive majority of them, over 78% in his data set, had spouses who completely opted out of the workforce post-marriage.
So his theory posits that a traditional marriage is not an oppressive patriarchy, it is a highly optimized division of labor.
Exact.
How does the compounding work in his model?
Think of it economically. If a wife spends 10,000 hours over a decade managing the household logistics, optimizing the children's education, and completely shielding the husband from domestic friction,
It frees him up.
it frees the primary earner to take massive asymmetrical career risks. That extreme specialization compounds over decades into vast generational wealth and dynastic dominance.
The analogy I'd use here is that Riker views a family like a ruthless corporate merger.
It's definitely not a Disney romance.
Now, to him, a marriage is a 50-year tactical business plan. Love and affection are strictly secondary to structural hierarchy, efficient resource allocation, and building an impenetrable legal defense against the state.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights a profound paradox in his worldview.
What's the paradox?
He is simultaneously demanding a return to ancient biblical family values, quoting the Book of Genesis and Thomas Aquinas, while advising men to employ hyper-modern, absolutely ruthless legal and financial tactics to enforce those values.
The advice he gives to men who are already facing divorce is brutal. He calls it discovery phase warfare.
Discovery phase warfare. He tells men to use the legal system's massive bureaucracy as a weapon. He advises filing FOIA requests to pull data. He suggests subpoenaing an ex-wife's Starbucks barista to track her spending habits.
Or pulling her Lyft receipts to prove she violated custody curfews.
He even suggests using blockchain smart contracts to gamify divorce law.
Hiding assets in decentralized ledgers that a family court judge doesn't even have the technical vocabulary to subpoena.
He justifies this by stating, in a world where digital terms of service are longer than the Ten Commandments but possess half the honesty, survival demands Old Testament shrewdness combined with quantum cryptography.
That is quite the quote. And it's full-blown financial prepping at this point.
Well, absolutely.
He instructs men to hoard gold bullion, specifically advising them to bury it in 3 geographically separate, unmarked locations.
And to memorize the GPS coordinates rather than ever writing them down.
He advocates buying AR-15s, stockpiling 50-pound bags of rice because it's cheaper than a daily coffee habit, and adopting an apocalypse mindset not as paranoia, but as a high moral virtue.
But the absolute zenith of this economic alchemy, the moment where the book transitions from prepping into sovereign nation building, is his detailed instruction on escaping central banking altogether.
Okay, yes, the Staten Island ferry plan. I could not believe this section when I read it.
It is out there. He outlines a highly specific 4-step logistical plan to create a floating micronation.
Step 1.
Step 1. Log on to govdeals.com and purchase a decommissioned Staten Island ferry at auction for roughly $218,000.
Just buy a ferry.
Step 2. Register that massive vessel under the Guernsey flag via an offshore LLC to utilize maritime flags of convenience.
Shielding you from U.S. tax law.
Exactly.
Step 3 involves outfitting the ferry with Starlink satellite arrays, industrial desalination pumps for fresh water.
And a black market 50 caliber water cannon for repelling borders.
And step 4 is the geopolitical maneuver.
Anchor it in international waters off the coast of Cuba, declaring sovereign micronation status. Riker argues that positioning it near Cuba forces a geopolitical stalemate. If the U.S. tries to intervene with the Coast Guard, it risks an international incident in Cuban economic zones.
It literally sounds like a James Bond villain's origin story.
He actually acknowledges the absurdity of it. He cites the real-world example of a crypto billionaire who tried to build a seasteading galleon that sank in a hurricane, taking $47 million in Dogecoin to the bottom of the ocean.
A cautionary tale.
But Riker uses the ferry to make a broader philosophical point. True sovereignty requires completely exiting the fiat currency system.
You have to become what the UN might classify as a pirate, but what history will remember as a visionary.
He likens it to Noah building the ark while the rest of the world mocked him before the flood.
Which perfectly sets up the final section of the book.
Because all of this, the grueling physical combat, the gold hoarding, the linguistic warfare, and the seasteading dreams, it all serves one ultimate purpose for the author.
Legacy.
Yes. The deep dive explores these final chapters, and they focus entirely on legacy over longevity.
Riker doesn't care about personal longevity or dying with the most toys. For him, the ultimate victory is outliving the current progressive culture by hard-coding your values into your descendants.
He urges men to stop thinking in terms of fiscal quarters and start thinking in terms of centuries.
Exactly like the Habsburg dynasty in Europe.
The Habsburgs are his historical model here. They maintained a grip on the Holy Roman Empire and vast swaths of Europe for over 6 centuries.
And they didn't do this through constant warfare.
No, they did it through ruthless consolidation. Riker focuses on their strict enforcement of primogeniture.
The legal mechanism where the entire estate, titles, and wealth pass exclusively to the firstborn son.
Preventing the dilution of power among multiple heirs.
Riker wants modern men to treat their bloodline as an exclusive, tightly controlled corporate entity. He wants to bring primogeniture back via modern legal loopholes.
To achieve this, he suggests weaponizing family trust funds.
But he doesn't want them used just to pay for a liberal arts college.
No, he wants to use trusts as ideological enforcement mechanisms.
He calls them progressive triggers.
He provides actual templates in the book for writing a trust that dictates highly specific lifestyle payouts.
Give an example.
For example, the trust might mandate that a grandson who decides to live off the grid, shearing sheep in Montana, earns triple the financial payout of a descendant who decides to enroll in a university gender studies seminar.
Or the trust might offer a massive $500,000 bonus for siring a firstborn child within a traditional marriage by age 25.
He is actively using generational wealth to financially incentivize agrarian, military, or hyper-traditional lifestyles.
While financially starving any descendant who pursues modern, progressive academic paths.
Which forces us to ask a massive question about his underlying philosophy.
Think about the mechanics of this, right? By financially coercing your descendants to live exactly as you dictate from beyond the grave, aren't you just creating a new, highly controlled matrix for your own children?
Aren't you stripping them of the very sovereignty you claim to value?
Exactly. It seems completely counterintuitive.
It is the most fascinating, glaring contradiction in the entire text. Riker's answer to societal control is not classical liberal freedom.
No.
His answer to state control is to establish an even stricter, ironclad patriarchal control mechanism of his own design.
He's replacing the state's matrix with the father's matrix.
Because that reflects his core foundational belief regarding human nature. Power is never a vacuum.
There is no neutral ground.
Exactly. If you don't control your bloodline, your wealth, and the values of your children, the state and the prevailing culture inevitably will.
To Riker, Coercive pressure in the direction of tradition is the only viable defense against coercive pressure in the direction of progressivism.
That's his ultimate thesis.
Wow. Okay, let's take a collective breath and summarize the incredibly intense journey we have just taken through Alchemy of Adversity.
We've examined a text by Conrad Riker that operates as a radical, uncompromising battlefield manual.
It is specifically engineered for men who feel fundamentally betrayed by modern institutions.
From corporate HR departments to family courts to the public education system.
And his prescription for surviving that perceived betrayal is potent. He demands stoic suffering, the total elimination of backup plans.
He prescribes blunt force physical combat to reset the nervous system.
He advocates for aggressive linguistic defiance against modern gender paradigms.
And extreme financial prepping, all the way up to buying decommissioned ferries to escape the Federal Reserve.
Which leaves us with a final overarching implication to consider.
When you connect all these disparate dots, the digital detoxing, the physical training, the homeschooling in dead languages, the hoarding of gold, the weaponized trust funds, you see a highly deliberate blueprint for total cultural separation.
It's not about reforming the system at all. It's about abandoning it.
So here's a final provocative thought to chew on. Something that builds on Riker's text, but forces us to look at the macro consequences.
Let's hear it.
If this specific, highly motivated, well-resourced subset of men successfully executes this plan.
If they actually unplug.
Right. If they create parallel alternative economies, establish crypto-backed seasteading communities, build parallel education systems, and fund rigid, traditionalist dynasties, what happens to the broader society they leave behind?
Right. If the guys who historically know how to fix the plumbing, build the electrical grids, and fight the wars decide they are systematically opting out of mainstream Western culture.
Are we simply watching an alienated fringe movement vent its frustrations online? Or are we watching the early, foundational stages of a permanent, unbridgeable cultural and economic fracture in Western civilization?
If they believe the X-ray machine of society is irreparably broken, they aren't trying to fix the hospital.
They are gathering their resources to build a fortress in the wilderness.
That is a heavy structural thought to leave on. Thank you for joining us as we navigated the intense architecture of this deep dive.
It was a dense one.
As always, please remember to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an exploration into these complex cultural currents.
And if you want to examine the source material for yourself, which we always encourage, to see exactly how these arguments are constructed.
Check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy Alchemy of Adversity today.
And be sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker at Substack.
Until next time, keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you.